Imagine you're just sitting in a casino, right? And you're staring at a slot machine. You pull the lever, the wheels spin, and you watch your money just disappear.
Happens to the best of us.
Right. But then right before the reels stop, it flashes 2 cherries and like a lemon. So you didn't win, you lost.
But your brain doesn't necessarily see it that way.
Exactly. Inside your brain, this massive wave of dopamine just crashed through your system, basically screaming at you to pull that lever one more time. So today, we are looking at those invisible strings that control our behavior.
Yeah, those hidden forces that dictate, everything from why you automatically buckle your seatbelt the second you sit in the car to why checking your social media feed feels so incredibly addictive.
And our mission for this deep dive is to really give you a shortcut to understanding those invisible forces because, they are everywhere once you know what to look for.
They really are. It's a fascinating shift in perspective once you start seeing the actual machinery behind why we do what we do. And to unpack that machinery today, we thought we'd play with our dynamic just a little bit.
Yeah, we're changing it up.
Just for this deep dive, I'm going to step into the role of the lecturer. So I'll be guiding you through the underlying science and the mechanisms of behavior.
And I will proudly claim the role of the student. I'll be the one raising my hand, pushing back on the theories, and, asking the questions that you're probably already thinking of as you listen.
It's the perfect setup.
Right, and to set our foundation as any good student should, today's material comes entirely from Section 6.3 of Chapter 6 from Psychology 2E. So consider that our syllabus.
A perfect starting point. And to open our lecture, let me introduce you to a dolphin named Spirit.
Okay, Spirit the dolphin.
Yeah, Spirit lives at the National Aquarium in Baltimore. And when her trainer blows a whistle, Spirit immediately leaps into the air and does this spectacular flip.
Because she knows a treat is coming, right?
Exactly. The direct consequence of that flip is a fish. And that simple exchange perfectly encapsulates the core concept of Section 6.3, which is operant conditioning.
Okay, wait, because we've actually explored classical conditioning before in a previous deep dive. That was all about Pavlov and his dogs salivating at the sound of a bell.
Right, the classic bell and food experiment.
But that was about automatic biological reflexes. Salivating isn't a choice. So if classical conditioning is just about hijacking our natural reflexes, operant conditioning has to be fundamentally different, right?
Hit the nail on the head.
Because a dolphin isn't born with a biological reflex to do a flip when it hears a whistle.
Exactly. That realization is exactly what drove the psychologist B.F. Skinner to redefine the whole field. He looked at classical conditioning and recognized this massive limitation.
Which was what?
Well, that it only applies to existing behaviors that are reflexively elicited. It completely fails to explain how we learn brand new, complex behaviors. You don't have a natural reflex to ride a bicycle.
Or to type on a keyboard, or to cook a meal. Nobody's born with a typing reflex. We have to acquire those actions somehow.
Right. And to explain that acquisition, Skinner built on something called the law of effect. This was first proposed by another psychologist named Edward Thorndike.
The law of effect. Okay.
It's elegantly simple, honestly. Behaviors that are followed by satisfying consequences are more likely to be repeated. And behaviors followed by unpleasant consequences are less likely to be repeated.
So basically, if an action feels good or gets you what you want, you do it again. If it feels bad or costs you, you stop doing it.
That's the core of it, yes.
The textbook gives the ultimate everyday example for this, which is our jobs. The primary reason most of us show up for work every day is the paycheck.
Right, the ultimate satisfying consequence.
Yeah. Even if you tolerate your job, if the paycheck suddenly stopped coming, your attendance would almost certainly drop to 0 pretty fast. The consequence drives the behavior.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But proving that scientifically feels incredibly messy. You can't just observe people in an office and isolate their exact motivations.
Oh yeah, there are way too many variables in an office.
Which is why Skinner took it out of the office and into the laboratory. He needed systematic, undeniable proof. So working from Thorndike's foundation, he built what became famously known as the Skinner box.
Oh, the operant conditioning chamber?
Yes. He would place an animal, usually a rat or a pigeon, inside this highly controlled box. For a rat, there would be a lever. The box was rigged with food dispensers, speakers, lights, everything.
Just completely isolating the animal.
Exactly. If the rat happened to press the lever, a food pellet dropped into the tray, and the mechanical recorder tracked every single response.
So he stripped away all the messy real-world variables just to study exactly how behaviors are strengthened or weakened purely by their consequences.
That was the genius of it, yes.
Okay, this actually brings up a terminology issue from section 6.3 that I really want to clarify for everyone listening, because as the student, I definitely got tripped up here.
Let's hear it.
The text uses words like positive and negative. And in everyday language, we hear positive and think good. And we hear negative and think bad.
Oh, yeah. That is one of the most common stumbling blocks in psychology.
It's confusing. It feels like they're using them completely differently, almost like mathematical operators instead of emotions.
You literally have to strip away your emotional definitions of good and bad here. In operant conditioning, think of it purely as math. Positive simply means you are adding something to the equation.
Okay. And negative means you are taking something away, just subtraction.
Exactly. Addition and subtraction. And then we have the other two core terms, reinforcement and punishment.
Right. So by definition, reinforcement means you are trying to increase a behavior, and punishment means you are trying to decrease a behavior.
You've got the formula perfectly. So let's look at how they interact, starting with the most intuitive combination. Positive reinforcement.
Adding something to increase a behavior.
Right. You add a desirable stimulus to increase a behavior. Think about the classic parenting bribe. You tell a 5-year-old that if they clean their room, they get a new art set.
They clean the room, the desirable toy is added, and the room cleaning behavior increases. It makes total sense. We all respond to rewards.
And it scales up, too. The textbook mentions this fascinating study involving second-grade students in Dallas who were struggling with reading.
Oh, right. The researchers decided to just pay them, didn't they?
They did $2 every time they read a book and passed a short quiz on it, and the result was a highly significant increase in reading comprehension.
Wow. $2 a book goes a long way in second grade.
It really does. And Skinner actually anticipated that exact kind of educational application. Long before modern ed tech, he invented an early teaching machine that instantly rewarded students for small, correct steps in learning.
Just giving them that immediate positive reinforcement.
Which is crucial for cementing new knowledge. So let's tackle the tricky one next, negative reinforcement.
Okay, let me do the math. Negative is subtraction, reinforcement is increase. So taking something away to increase a behavior.
You got it. You remove an undesirable stimulus to increase a desired behavior. The classic example happens every single time you get in your car.
The seatbelt beep.
Yes. If you start driving without buckling up, the car starts blaring that annoying beep. The only way to remove that negative stimulus is to perform the desired behavior.
Fastening your seatbelt.
Right. Another great example is horseback riding. A rider applies pressure to the horse's sides with their legs.
And the horse wants that pressure removed so it turns or speeds up.
Exactly. The moment it does, the rider releases the pressure. The removal of the pressure reinforces the turning behavior.
You know, let me throw an analogy at you to make sure I'm totally grasping this, because people constantly confuse negative reinforcement with punishment.
They really do, all the time.
So negative reinforcement isn't a penalty at all. It's like taking off a really heavy backpack after a long hike.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, you're removing a burden, which is a massive relief. And that feeling of relief makes you want to keep doing whatever behavior got rid of the backpack in the first place.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The removal of the burden is the reinforcer itself. Punishment operates on entirely different logic. Its sole purpose is to stop a behavior.
Right, which leads us to positive punishment. Addition to decrease a behavior.
You add an undesirable stimulus to stop an action. So if a student's texting in class and the teacher publicly scolds them, the scolding is added to decrease the texting.
Or if a child runs into the busy street and the parent makes them write, "I will not run into the street 100 times.
Exactly. Though the text dedicates some serious space to the drawbacks of that approach, particularly physical punishment.
Yeah, it seems to backfire more often than not.
It's a critical limitation. Physical punishment might temporarily stop a behavior in the heat of the moment, but it frequently teaches fear. A child might become afraid of running into the street, sure, but they might also just become terrified of the parent who punished them.
Which is definitely not the goal.
Not at all. Furthermore, it models aggression. Children who experience physical punishment often learn that when you are angry or frustrated, physical force is the acceptable solution.
That makes a lot of sense. That's a major reason why modern psychology overwhelmingly favors catching a child doing something good and rewarding it, rather than punishing the bad.
Positives work better than negatives in the long run. Which leaves us with the final piece of the math. negative punishment.
Taking something pleasant away to decrease a behavior, like a kid misbehaves, so you take away their favorite toy or their screen time. The pleasant stimulus is subtracted to stop the bad behavior.
Exactly.
Okay, but here is where my logic as a student hits a wall. If reinforcement only works after a behavior actually happens, how on earth did Skinner get a pigeon to play ping pong?
I was waiting for you to ask that.
I mean, a pigeon is never going to spontaneously pick up a paddle and rally a ball across a table just so you can reward it. That's just not a natural behavior.
You've identified the exact problem with teaching complex behaviors. You can't just sit around waiting for a pigeon to accidentally play ping pong. You have to actively guide them using a process called shaping.
Shaping. Okay, how does that work?
Shaping involves rewarding successive approximations of a target behavior. Basically, you break the complex action down into tiny, achievable microsteps.
So you don't start with the final goal of ping pong.
Not at all. First, you might give the pigeon a food pellet, just for turning its body toward the ping pong ball. Once it masters that, you move the goalposts.
You stop rewarding the turn.
Right. You only reward the pigeon if it takes a physical step toward the ball. Then, only if its beak actually touches the ball.
Wow, so you continuously raise the bar, reinforcing closer and closer approximations until the full complex behavior is achieved?
Yes, and this requires strict stimulus discrimination.
What does that mean in this context?
The animal has to learn exactly which specific cue it should be responding to. Just like Pavlov's dogs learned to only salivate to a specific bell tone, not a car horn, the pigeon needs to know exactly what setup means time to play ping pong.
You know, we do this constantly with humans, too. Think about teaching a toddler to clean their room.
Oh, definitely.
You don't just point to a disaster zone, say, clean your room, and expect a pristine result. You shape the behavior. First, you reward them for putting away just one single block.
And then,
Once they get good at that, the reward requires putting away all the blocks, then the books, then the clothes, until the entire room is clean.
that's a perfect real-world example of shaping. And the type of reward we use during that shaping process matters immensely. Psychology categorizes these into primary and secondary reinforcers.
Okay, break those down for me.
Primary reinforcers have innate biological value. You don't have to learn to want them. Food, water, sleep, touch, pleasure.
So if a kid plays a great soccer game and gets an ice cream cone, that ice cream is a primary reinforcer.
Exactly. Or think about jumping into a cool lake on a sweltering hot day. The physical relief of the cool water is an innate primary reinforcer.
Whereas a secondary reinforcer is something that only has value because our society has linked it to a primary one, right? Like praise or stickers on a chore chart or money.
Yes, money is the ultimate secondary reinforcer. The textbook points out that if you were stranded on a desert island with $1 million in cash, that money is entirely useless.
Because it's lost its link to primary needs like food and shelter. You can't eat a $100 bill.
Exactly. But in a functioning society, secondary reinforcers are incredibly powerful tools. They form the basis of token economies.
Token economies, like behavior management systems.
Yeah, they're heavily used in schools, prisons, psychiatric hospitals. A study by Adams, Reschke, and Apkanar actually showed that using a token economy significantly improved the behavior of 8th graders.
How does that actually look in practice?
Well, in special education settings, a child might earn a token for keeping quiet hands instead of pinching, and they can later trade those secondary tokens in for a primary reward, like playtime or a snack.
Got it. Now, on the flip side of behavior management is the universally dreaded timeout, which, thinking about our map from earlier, is actually a textbook example of negative punishment, right?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Imagine a child throwing blocks at their sibling. You put them in timeout. You are removing them from a pleasant stimulus, the fun of playing with blocks, to decrease the block-throwing behavior.
Makes sense.
But there are very specific psychological rules for a timeout to actually be effective.
Right. I remember the text saying Rule 1 is crucial.
Yeah.
The activity they are removed from actually has to be desirable.
That is so important.
Because if a kid is doing math homework they absolutely hate and they act out, sending them to timeout is a terrible idea. You're actually negatively reinforcing the bad behavior by giving them an escape from the map.
It completely backfires. They'll
Yeah.
just act out every time it's math time.
I know.
The other rules are just as vital, though. The length of the timeout should be 1 minute for each year of the child's age.
So a 5-minute timeout for a 5-year-old.
Exactly. The caregiver must remain calm and critically completely ignore the child during the timeout,
Even if they're throwing a tantrum.
especially then. Any attention, even yelling, can act as a reinforcement. And finally, when it's over, you give them a hug or a kind word to reset the environment.
Okay, so we've established how to shape a behavior and the different ways to reward or punish it. But practically speaking, once a behavior is learned, do we really have to keep handing out rewards every single time, forever? Because that sounds exhausting.
You'll be relieved to know we don't. Rewarding a behavior every single time is called continuous reinforcement. It is the absolute fastest way to teach a brand new behavior, but it's terrible for maintaining it long term.
Why is that?
Because the moment the reward stops, the behavior stops. So once the behavior is established, you switch to partial reinforcement, where the reward only comes sometimes.
Okay, and the textbook breaks this down along two major fault lines, right?
Yeah.
Is the schedule predictable or unpredictable? And is it based on the passage of time or the amount of effort?
Exactly. Let's walk through how that changes our actions. What happens if the reward is based on predictable time?
That's a fixed interval schedule.
Right. A reward is delivered at set, predictable time intervals. Imagine a patient recovering from major surgery in the hospital. They have an IV painkiller, but the machine is locked, so it only dispenses a dose exactly once per hour.
The patient can push the button 50 times, but the reward only comes after that fixed 1-hour interval passes.
Psychologically, this is the least productive schedule. People figure out the timing quickly, and if the machine breaks and the reward stops coming, the behavior goes into extinction almost immediately.
The patient just stops pushing the button. Makes total sense. Once you realize the clock is broken, you give up. But what if the time is unpredictable?
That is a variable interval schedule. Think about a fast food restaurant manager who gets a $20 bonus if the store is perfectly clean when the regional inspector shows up.
But the manager has no idea when that inspector will arrive.
Exactly. Because the time interval is variable and unpredictable, the manager keeps the restaurant consistently clean all the time. It produces a moderate, steady rate of behavior.
You know, checking your social media operates on this exact same principle. You don't know exactly when a new, interesting post will populate your feed, so you keep steadily checking.
That's a great modern example. Okay, so those two are based entirely on the clock. You just have to wait. But what if the reward has nothing to do with time and is purely based on your own hustle?
Does the behavior change?
Dramatically.
Yeah.
That brings us to fixed ratio schedules, a set number of responses. Think of a salesperson working purely on commission at an eyeglass store. Sell a pair, get a reward.
This schedule produces a massive high-speed response rate. That salesperson will try to sell everyone who walks in a backup pair, prescription sunglasses, and a cleaning kit.
They are highly motivated to increase their output, but it often optimizes quantity over quality. They don't care if you actually need the glasses. They just need to hit their ratio for the payout.
Which brings us to the final combination, and arguably the most dangerous one in modern society: unpredictable effort. The variable ratio schedule.
It is the most powerful partial reinforcement schedule we know of. The ultimate example is gambling. Let's go back to that slot machine we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah, you put in a quarter, nothing happens. Another quarter, nothing.
Then suddenly bells ring and a handful of quarters drops out. You keep playing, and eventually you lose all your winnings. Logically, you should walk away. But the behavior persists.
Because the player knows the reward is tied to the number of times they pull the lever, but they have absolutely no idea which specific pull will hit the jackpot.
Right.
So the unpredictability is actually the feature, not a bug. It's the brain constantly whispering, the very next pull is the one, that makes the schedule almost impossible to break.
It is incredibly resistant to extinction. And the neuroscience behind why it works is staggering. Modern brain imaging shows that gambling activates the exact same reward centers in the brain that are lit up by addictive drugs like cocaine and heroin.
Wow, so the brain is just flooded with dopamine.
Flooded, and as we touched on earlier, you don't even have to win to get that hit.
Oh, right, the near miss.
That is the most insidious part. When the slot machine shows 2 matching symbols and 1 mismatch, your logical brain knows you lost. But your primitive brain registers that almost win and dumps a rush of dopamine into your system anyway.
Just keeping you hooked.
Exactly. The thrill also triggers norepinephrine, the stress hormone, while simultaneously messing with serotonin levels, which govern pulse control. It's a potent chemical cocktail.
It's terrifying how easily our biology can be hacked. But, you know, I have to say, as the student here, everything Skinner proposes treats humans and animals like biological robots.
Yes, so
Well, we press a lever, we get a reward. We push a button, we get dopamine. It implies that everything is just an external transaction. Does Skinner really believe our internal thoughts, our expectations, our actual minds don't matter at all in this learning process?
You have just hit on the fundamental blind spot of radical behaviorism. Skinner was incredibly strict in his views. He literally referred to the mind as a black box.
A black box. They're just completely ignoring what happens inside.
Yeah, he believed human cognition was unknowable, unmeasurable, and therefore completely irrelevant to the scientific study of learning. To Skinner, only observable behavior and consequences mattered.
Well, I'm rejecting that. My thoughts definitely matter when I'm learning something. We aren't just reacting blindly until food drops.
And you aren't the only one who felt that way. Another behaviorist named Edward C. Tolman had the exact same objection, and he designed a brilliant experiment to prove Skinner wrong.
Oh, I love a good scientific rivalry. What did Tolman do?
Well, at the time, the accepted dogma was that for learning to occur, an organism had to receive an immediate reinforcement. Tolman tested this by putting hungry rats into a complex maze. But crucially, he didn't put any food at the end.
He didn't reward them at all?
Nope. He just let them wander around aimlessly.
So according to Skinner's rules, because there was no satisfying consequence, those rats shouldn't be learning a single thing about the maze. They're just killing time.
Right. But after 10 days of this unrewarded wandering, Tolman suddenly placed food at the end of the maze.
And what happened?
The moment the rats realized there was food, something incredible happened. They navigated the maze instantly and flawlessly. They found the food just as fast as a control group of rats that had been rewarded with food every single day from the very beginning.
Wait, if they weren't being rewarded to learn the correct path for 10 days, how did they know exactly where to go the second the food appeared?
Because while they were just aimlessly wandering, their brains were quietly doing the work. They were building what Tolman called a cognitive map.
A cognitive map. Like a mental picture of the maze's spatial layout.
Exactly. This demonstrated something groundbreaking called latent learning. It's learning that occurs beneath the surface, but isn't actually observable in behavior until there is a motivation or a reason to demonstrate it.
The black box was open. Our brains are constantly absorbing information just in case we need it later.
Yes, it's an evolutionary survival tool.
Think about a kid who sits in the passenger seat while their parent drives them to school every day. The kid isn't getting rewarded for memorizing the turns, they're just staring out the window.
But then, one day, the parent can't drive them.
Right. The kid hops on a bicycle and perfectly navigates the exact route to school. The cognitive map was there the whole time, they just never had a reason to demonstrate that latent learning until the car was unavailable.
That's a brilliant everyday example. Psychologist Laura Carlson has done fascinating work extending this to how humans navigate modern, confusing environments, too.
Oh, like big airports or something.
Like wandering into a massive university library or a sprawling museum where all the hallways look identical. Carlson suggests that we actively seek out specific, unique features.
Like an odd statue or a water fountain or a weird painting?
Exactly. And we anchor them into our cognitive maps as we walk in. We use those mental landmarks to orient ourselves and find our way back out, regardless of whether someone is handing us a piece of candy to do so. Our minds are actively participating in the learning process, not just waiting for external cues.
So if we look at the big picture here, we've traveled a long way in this lecture.
We really have.
We started with the realization that reflexes aren't enough. We need consequences to learn new actions. We broke down the math of behavior, realizing positive and negative just mean addition and subtraction.
Don't forget the token economies.
Right. And we uncovered the sneaky power of partial reinforcement, especially that Vegas-style variable ratio schedule that hacks our dopamine. But ultimately, we discovered that we aren't just biological robots in a Skinner box.
Definitely not.
Our brains are constantly actively mapping the world around us, gathering latent learning, even when there's no prize on the line.
You've captured the evolution of the science perfectly. A star student, truly.
Well, thank you. And for you listening, whether you are trying to break a doom-scrolling habit on your phone, attempting to train a stubborn puppy, or figuring out the best way to get a toddler to clean up their toys, these operant conditioning principles are silently at play in your daily life.
The invisible strings are always there.
But now you know how to see them.
And before we end this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, rather provocative thought taken directly from the textbook's exploration of gambling and the brain.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
Researchers know definitively that pathological gamblers have altered levels of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin compared to healthy individuals. But because strict ethical rules prevent scientists from taking healthy people and intentionally turning them into problem gamblers for a study.
Right. Obviously, you can't do that.
We face a massive scientific blind spot. We don't actually know the direction of causation.
Wait, what does that mean in practical terms?
Forces you to ask a chicken and egg question.
Right.
Are people with certain pre-existing brain chemistries naturally drawn to the addictive nature of variable ratio schedules? Or does the very act of engaging with these unpredictable rewards physically alter the neurotransmitter levels in your brain over time?
Wow. So playing the game might literally be rewiring your biological hardware.
It might be.
That is a deeply chilling thought to ponder the next time you pull down to refresh your social media feed, waiting to see if you hit the jackpot. It turns out we might all just be Spirit the Dolphin doing flips for an invisible whistle. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.